All right, take two. Hi, everyone. Fantastic. So I'm Sawyer. I'm here to talk about Perl 524 and the art of motorcycle maintenance, or the Zen of the art of motorcycle maintenance, which I think is just nice as a title, but that's about it. I'm the pumpkin, which means that basically I'm a very good person to embarrass, which people have seemed to be doing. And other than that, I get to work on Perl, and I get to make some decisions, but mostly help decisions be made. 524 was not actually mine at all in any way, shape, or form. It is actually the culmination of the recent year under Rick's supervision. Is his last one, and I'd like to talk about it a little bit because Rick is not here with us to give a much better talk about it. So you're stuck with me. Okay, so 524 is the topic, and due to this, I actually have a lot of time. It will be a very interesting hypothesis to test whether I'm able to make use of all of that time. And I'll start with talking about change. There is a very good quote by Francis Bacon that I really, really like. I'm going to put it in all of my emails as a signature at the top and at the bottom. The quote is, "Things alter for the worse spontaneously if they be not altered for the better designedly," which basically means that we must design for things to improve, or they will still alter, but it will be for the worst and it will be spontaneously. And I think that is a very interesting comment to make, and it relates a lot to development. So let's talk about development. We make a lot of changes. And once a month, we gather all of them up into a release. Last Sunday was the release of 525.4, released by Bingos. And the next month is going to have another release of all of the changes that we've collected during that month. Okay? Every single month, you get a release. That is development release, though. It will hopefully be by different people. We try to kind of switch that around, so we have different people making these releases in order to make the process better and easier, in order to prevent burnout of this process, because a release can take maybe 2 to 3 days up to a week to prepare, so it's not that easy. You can download these releases. You can download them, you can compile them, you can run them, you can test them, you can use them. They work. But as I said, they are development releases. They're not stable releases. So we release them mainly in order to test out all the changes that we gathered in that month as a whole, as a single unit. What we do is run smoking. And when we say smoking, these are basically tests. And we run them on different operating systems and different platforms in order to see what could break and what has broken. It's very, very interesting because then we feed those lessons into some of the changes that were possibly risky or introduced breakage that we didn't realize how to properly do this when you use a very specific platform with a certain architecture and configuration of the interpreter and some. The table of options is so huge that we really do need to test these out because no single person knows all of these. Then what we do is smoke CPAN, and by smoking CPAN, it means that we're actually running all of the tests of modules on CPAN with this new Perl every single month. And what we want to do is verify that we didn't break any big module, or that we didn't break any module. So we will get reports. These reports are actually called BBCs. Bleed Perl breaks CPAN. Bleed Perl is the branch that we use for development. And what we want to do is collect these changes that we've made that month that broke a module, because that module was either doing something that it shouldn't have, and maybe we still want to support it, or they did something they should have, and they wanted to, and it was completely legitimate, but we accidentally broke it without knowing that this is something they did for it. Perl has a lot of tests, but you can twist Perl in more ways than the tests actually cover. So that's very, very important. And we oftentimes revise a fix, or revert it, or sometimes even provide a patch to the module saying, hey, you did this thing and you shouldn't be twisting Perl in this way, and it did change and we're okay with it changing, but it broke your stuff, so here's a patch to fix it. Then once a year we release that stable version, which is the gather of all the collection, is the collection that we gathered of all of these changes that we made during those months. for that year. Every single year, you have a new stable release of Perl, which is pretty amazing. Now, you get these in several ways. First of all, you get them through vendors. GNU Linux, BSD, Solaris, HPUX, ZOS, Herd, so many more. You get these on Windows specifically. There are two that you can get, Strawberry Perl and ActiveState. Both provide vendoring for Perl. And you can even install your own using Perl Brew. So you just install this program, and this program will download whichever version you want of Perl. It even supports the development versions if you want to try them out, because we made a change that you want to see how we will respond and how your code will respond to that. And it will help you build all of those and let you use it, either for a user, for the entire machine, for a project. It's pretty interesting. While we continue to develop, when we come across major bug fixes, usually security, what we will do is backport them, which means that we will apply them to an older version. We support 2 versions back, so you're able to get important fixes to Perl that you're using, but that is not the most recent Perl necessarily. So right now we're developing Perl 5.26. Hopefully that will be the next stable. So we're now at 5.25.4, the next version 5.25.5, it will lead to 5.26. So while we continue to develop, if we find a problem, we will go back and fix 2 recent versions, so you could use those and not move up to the most recent changes, but still get those important fixes. The next ones are actually in our release candidate, the 4th, and there will be 5.24.1 and 5.22.3. We've already released 5.24, and we've already released 2 additional fixes for 5.22. So we're talking about changes, right? Changes. Considering this is only a 5.24 talk, I will not be discussing any changes of other Perl versions. Specifically, I will not be talking about things like Unicode strings. Unicode strings came out in 5.14, that's 2011. It's a long time ago. It added full support for Unicode semantics to all string operations that are executed and all the regular expressions that are compiled, and it avoids most forms of the Unicode bug. So it's very recommended. I will also not be discussing the block package. There's an interesting problem that a lot of beginners hit, where my and our are different scopes, different situations. So a my is scoped to, it's a lexical, so it's scoped to a block. And if you don't have a block, it's the file. And our is based on package. So usually when we see someone write more than one package in the same file, they might get these confused, where you have a my that is available to the next package, and they think it isn't. But if you use a block package and you do this, well, now it's very clear because the my is scoped. With proper indentation, it's also very readable. But you really shouldn't put more than one package in the same file, because it's very confusing. I will not be discussing custom operators. Custom ops are really, really, really interesting. We're scratching the surface of what we can do with them, and we've already done quite a lot. I've given a talk about refutil, in which I do some stuff with them. They're very fascinating. We also have pluggable keywords relating to that, and they are also very interesting. Current sub is something that I actually like. I don't use enough, and I should. Take a look at this example. We have a function here that tries to call to itself in order to recursively print an entire tree. But there's a problem with this. The problem that you have here is, can anyone spot it? Sorry? Well, did I repeat the name? Sure, but that oftentimes we use these as callbacks. And if I turn it into a callback, I get this. And this is where you actually see a problem, when you start using this situation in this specific code in different situations. So the code, I'm sorry for confusing, the bug was not in the previous one, but when you start using that situation with callbacks, you get this problem. Here is actually a bug.
The other problem is that you can get infinite recursion if there is a loop in it.
Yes. So the problem that we have here is actually syntactic. It's very obvious. We're trying to access a variable as a callback, and the variable does not exist yet because we're just defining it where we're using it, so it's kind of tricky. So we can do better. We can define it, and then we can use it, but then there is a different bug. Right? There's a kind of a closure over the thing, and then we get a memory leak here, right? So that's kind of tricky, and a lot of people do this. So cyclic memory leak, that's not good. What we could do is take this entire thing, use a thing called weaken. It's a function from scalar util. And if you weaken this, you can reduce the reference count by 1. And it doesn't just, I'm sorry, reduce the reference count is not the right phrasing. What it actually does is make sure that you won't incur additional reference counts, so you won't keep it alive by closing over it, which is good. The only problem is that you're not really weakening something that has a value. Like, it doesn't really reference anything. So what are you weakening? That won't actually work. So no, that's a problem. What you can do though is create something like a Y combination. You can have a function that receives itself as a function and then sends it off to that function as the first parameter and go into that. That's a bit tricky and it's quite confusing because you get into composability, extendability. It becomes kind of annoying. On the other hand, you have this thing that we could use, the current sub feature. And the current sub feature allows you to use underbars or underscores, sub underscores. And what you get with this is that it will always hold a reference to the current subroutine being run, whether it's by name, whether it's a callback, and it will always work. It's very nice. It's very clean. So no, I'm not going to talk about this. The fold case function, Perl 5 has a very interesting internal representation for characters. And comparing Unicode in a case-insensitive way is very, very tricky. So let's take a look at this example. We want to compare two strings. We just lowercase them and compare them. If they have different cases, they will now all be lowercase, then everything is fine. Except it doesn't really work when you have Unicode. And that won't work either. I heard someone give this as a better solution. You just uppercase them, as if that's not the problem. Okay. What you actually want to do is use the regular expressions, because regular expressions are Unicode aware, they're awesome. And what you need to do is put it in. Of course, you need to put a quotation start and end there, so you actually use the strings the way they are and not interpolate them as additional regular expression characters. And of course, you want to anchor this. And of course, you have the I at the end to make it case insensitive, and there you go, that works. So with that additional thing, we can finally compare two strings in a Unicode way. Or you can just use FC, which is short for fold case. And if you call fold case, it's a function that does this. And it does the folding in a way that is Unicode aware, and now you can compare them. So it's pretty cool. It's actually provided, the FC function is provided by FC. If you don't know, there is a core developer called Father Chrysostomos, and he actually wrote the FC function. I'd like to thank Leon for the pun. Moving on, regular expression set operations. I think these are awesome. And I think that you should at least know that they exist, even if you don't use them. Take a look at this code. What this code will do is use a set operation of a plus and the ampersand over there. And what it will do is match any digit that is either tie or Laotian. I have never seen those scripts. Tie I have. But this will give you specific digits. It's very clear code as well. It's not complicated. It doesn't have a lot of characters. It's strings. It's pretty simple. This, for example, gives you a word character, but not the lowercase ones, which is pretty cool. It just does this set minus this set. Lexical subroutines. Let's say we have an app. The app has a new in order to create an object of the app. And we have a subroutine that provides some information. It has the invocant there, and what we do is go inside and get the value. And if we don't have a value, what we will do is initialize one with the function initialize value. Here is the initialize value subroutine. It does something to retrieve it or initialize it. And what you see here is that we've used the super sophisticated leading underscore in order to hide it from all of our users. No one can see it now, except you can fully access it. But what we can also do is put a my before it. And this lexical sub allows it to not be seen. It's now a my, just like a my x that no one can access, which is really, really cool. So now you don't even need the leading underscore. That's pretty cool. So that's nice. Subroutine signatures, they're awesome. We don't talk about them enough. I'm not going to cover them. Here's how they work. You have a sub foo. You can put in left and right, and now you get two variables, left and right, as parameters. You can also play with them. You can introduce another variable that you don't want to name, but you know is going to be there. You can initialize them in the signature. You can use a variable that already exists and play with it, right here. You can also play with a variable that exists in the signature itself, which is really, really nice. It's pretty cool. And you can also say, well, there's going to be additional variables supplied here. I know this. I don't want to name them. So it's pretty nice. Of course, hashes are also supported, so you can already receive a hash properly. There are key value slices. Key value slices contain, if we take a look at normal slices, I mean, I don't know a lot of people use this, but I use it a lot. And what we do here is we use the at the beginning to basically say, I want to retrieve more than one value from this array, and I'm going to retrieve 0 and -1. And then I get the first and the last. And I could do this for a range. I can also go to a hash and retrieve 2 values, but key value pairs allow you, key value slices allow you to get pairs of keys and values, not just the values themselves. So let's take a look at this hash. If we want to get both the keys and the values, what we can do is use the hash. Instead of the at there, we switch it to a hash, and now we get keys and values for foo and bar. So we get a subset that is foo1 and bar1. We leave the buzz out. So that's pretty cool, right? Arrays also have key value slices, not just hashes, and what you get from them is the numbers of the index. So you get, if it's A to Z, you get 3 in D, 4 in E, 6 in G, and you can put this in a hash as well. It's very useful. How many of you have written code that takes all of the days in a week or all of the months in a year, and then you put them into an array, and then you put them into a hash, and then you try to get the number and match it against, right? There you go. So you can use this. It's pretty cool. Postfix dereferencing is something kind of new. It didn't arrive in 5.24, so no, you're not going to hear about it. Here's how it works. See, what you have is an array reference, and what you do is usually dereference this way. I don't like it. I actually use this. I think it's much more readable. And what you can do with postfix is do it at the end of it, so you can continue forward, right? And then you just put what you're dereferencing it as, and then a star, and it's always a star. So let's take this. We go to the array ref, we go into one index, and then instead of then again wrapping it, what we could do is just move forward and say, dereference it. This is kind of nice. I like doing this because I hate having to then wrap everything that I do. So I do keys and then wrap. But instead, they just move forward. It's really nice. There's variable aliasing via references. I think most people don't know about it, not just don't use it. And then the people who know about it, most don't really use it. The way that it works is that you're able to create a reference, you're able to create an alias, via the reference. What we do here is bind bar to foo. And now we have two variables that actually go to the same place. So if we change bar, we actually just changed foo. Here's an example where you could use this. You could go through an array of hashes, and what you could do is grab the hash itself as a hash that points to the hash that you're iterating over. So you don't have to continually dereference stuff and continually go deeper and deeper in. When you have a big structure, it is incredibly useful. I want to talk about some optimizations that we had before 5.24. Integer allocations are faster, and it's pretty cool because we use integers once in a while. We have a regex optimizer. We have copy and write. We have another regex optimizer. I don't know why I have two slides. We have a strict regular expression syntax, so you can do use RE strict, and now you get a strict regular expression syntax. It's really cool. We dropped CGI PM. I will miss you. And it is available on CPAN and received a lot of very important updates thanks to Lee, who is giving a different talk now, so he can't hear this. So, okay, to summarize, I'm not going to talk about any of those. I will be talking about 5.24, so let's do that instead. First, what we're removing, and we are removing quite a bit, which is good. I hope we're going to continue to removing until there's nothing left except for the good stuff, because there are a lot of bad stuff. So let's see how we do this. First, the auto deref. How many people here know what this is? How many people here have used it? How many people have liked it? Okay. It's accidentally. I'm happy you said you used it accidentally because that is why we're removing it. It actually had so many of these corner cases that we didn't know about that you triggered actions you didn't intend to. And that is always bad. Whenever something happens you didn't intend to, that is really bad, as in life, usually. So this entire thing, when you have a reference and then you do a push on the reference, it basically says, oh, let me see, is this a reference? Ah, all right, then I'll just dereference it for you. And then, why did you do this? I gave you the wrong thing by accident. Well, because I'm trying to be smart and helpful, and I'm not, so I'm sorry. So we're going to remove this. It's done. It's out. The lexical underscore, the lexical topical variable, that's also a problem. Most people that used it didn't really use it right because they weren't really sure what it does, and most people use it by accident as well. Gone. Nested declarations is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite because I had a long discussion on what would be the purpose of it. And the discussion had two attending people, one who said, I don't see value in it, and one who said, I don't see value in it, but let's remove it. And because of it, let's remove it. And I think that if you can't look at this and know for sure what it does without, let me think a sec, then this is a problem. Because it means that this is confusing. Nested declarations, like, I don't know what it does, you know, and someone explained to me and I still don't know what it does. So we just decided to remove it. It's just confusing for no added value. There's no one who looks at this and says, finally, I can finally do this. I've been waiting for so long. I didn't even deploy the code just because I needed that feature. Okay. chdir, or as Rick says it, chdir, which I find funny. chdir, or changedir, or chdir. It can go to your home directory. Okay, if you've ever used the command line, you just run chdir and enter, it will go to your home directory, which is very, very useful. So chdir basically said, if you call chdir and whatever is in there is undef or empty, whatever, if it's false, I'm just going to do that. But the problem is that sometimes we actually send values and we don't know if the value is undef or empty, or it's accidentally done that way, or there's a bug, and it will just go to home, which is, you don't always want to go home, you know? So this now fails. This now also fails. And the reason is that usually you use it this way and you don't know what could happen because programs are complicated. And sometimes this value is derived from a very long process and you're not sure what it is, or user input, which you should never ever do without validating. So now, if you call chdir this way, you're not sending anything, you're explicitly stating, I know what I want to do. I want to use it as go to home. That will still work just fine. But if you call it a value and that value is false or empty, the value is false because it's empty, because it's in def, doesn't matter why, or you explicitly call it with in def or empty, it will not work. So that's, I think that's, sorry? What's an empty array? You know what? You got me. Not sure. Do you call chdir with arrays of values?
What will happen if you change it to the directory that exists called no?
Okay. This is not that kind of talk where like everyone asks me questions about the implementation. I'm just gonna update you a bunch of stuff, okay? So like, let's just sync on this. Okay, and later I might just hand the microphone over to Omari because he could probably answer everything. Okay, so let's talk about some stuff that we fixed. Okay, the chdir is also could be a fix. I think it's a fix. I would see it as a very important one, but it's also something we just removed the ability of. Okay, line numbering is something that most people don't actually encounter very much, but there was an integer overflow in them. We fixed them. Explicit braces in regex. So let's take a look at this regex. What does this do? It matches two consecutive digits. That is a very good description of it. What does this do? And you're in luck because my Vim syntax hiding, which I have brought into this slide, helps you understand. What does this do? I haven't said how many digits. So what do I have now? People in core cannot answer. Next. Can everyone try a suggestion? You can even just throw it out. Try something. Right, it's a digit and 2 curly braces. And if you don't have syntax hiding, or if your syntax highlighting is not smart enough, it won't know that this is what you're trying to do. It won't color it that way. And some people look at this and say, oh, well, I just wanted a digit of a certain amount. I don't care how many, which is weird. The thing is that Perl says, oh, you gave me the indicator of quantity, but you didn't give the quantity, so screw it. You don't get quantity, you just get the braces, because this is probably what you want, which is true, but it's actually really bad, because this might be a bug as well. So you can't do this. You can't do this either, because we want to make sure that we're doing what you're trying to do and not what you're not. All you do now is escape them and say, I would like a literal brace, please. Okay. Search in place, search and replace in place, which is the Perl, what's called the Perl PI, P-I-N-E, actually does a search and replace and changes the file in place, which means that it will rewrite the new one. There was a problem with it where if you didn't have enough storage to store the revised file, the original got screwed up too. So we fixed that. I like this one. This just takes na 8 times, adds this, we get this, right? Okay, never mind. I thought it was good. But if we change this 8 to this would crash. So now it doesn't crash, it just takes as much memory as it can until you're done. So that's pretty good, right? So yeah, yeah. I don't remember the details. I do believe it's called a bug. It was a bug, I'm sorry. That's basically it. I could phrase this as, these are things that we screwed up and we have just fixed and we're sorry. Okay, let's talk a little bit about optimizations, okay? All of the simple arithmetics are faster. So if you're doing addition, if you're doing subtraction, if you're multiplying, if you're dividing, these are all faster now, substantially faster. And we kind of tend to do stuff like that, right? So these are very important changes. We have the multi-deref op, and I wanted to describe this well. So I'm going to do this by showing you what happens when you have certain lines of code. And a lot of us have these lines of code because we tend to use sophisticated and large structures. So let's take a look at this variable. We add another one. As soon as someone knows what I'm doing here, raise your hand. So we're going to the bottom of the C. We're going to a hole in the bottom of the C. And there's a log there in a hole in the bottom of the C. There's a branch in the log in the hole in the bottom of the C. And there's, on the top of the branch, on top of the branch in the log and the hole at the bottom of the sea, there's a frog. And at there's a bump, sorry, before that, there's a bump on the frog and there's a speck there. And there's a fleck there as well. It's from this thing. There's a fleck on the speck, on the tail, on the frog, on the bump, on the branch, on the log, and the hole in the bottom of the sea. I knew it wouldn't go here. Okay. But what happens with this is the Perl actually has to create operations for it. And each one of these is an operation. So like you go to C, and now you dereference it, and then you go to -1, which would be the last index, and then you go to hole, and then you dereference that, and go to log, and dereference that, and go to the branch. These are all operations. Would you like to see all of them? Yes. Okay, so because you asked now, I've prepared ahead of time this. And what you see here is all of these operations they will do. Now, there's a lot of cruft here, so I'm going to clean it up for you. There you go. Okay, so now it's a bit of the cruft. Okay, and what you see here is all of these dereferencing things that are happening, right? Now, in 524, we created a multi-deref op, which is an op that's used to dereference multiple things, right? It's actually a very descriptive term. And this is how it looks like. This has cruft as well, so I'm going to remove that too. One op. Yeah, that's not bad. And it makes your programs really, really fast. K. Mathematically, I think it's K. I don't have the numbers with me, I'm sorry. Okay. So we also did a complete rework of what's called the context stack. If you're not familiar with it, you don't have to be familiar with it. It doesn't really something that you actually touch, but all of your code touches this. And by reworking the stack, the context stack, what we have is that Subroutine calls, when you enter a subroutine, when you exit from a subroutine, which was always more expensive Perl than we wanted it to be, it's now much cheaper, which is really good. Was it 35%? This is the number that I have in mind. I have a nod from a few people, so I think it's 35% faster, which is really good because we tend to use subroutines. Also, fixed string matches. This is an example that that someone had possibly sent to other speakers asking for their help, which they ignored, and someone had to add this, and I'm hoping that this regex, well, with 524, this regex would run way faster, and then people could reply to my email way faster. So fixed string matching, basically, it's now much faster. It's really cool. Okay, there were also some features in 524 because people like features. The post deref is actually in for good, which is great. We now have Amiga OS support again. You might mock, but in YAPC NA this year, Rick said this, and he asked, is anyone using Amiga? Someone raised their hand. So there you go. We also have Unicode 8. Unicode 8 is very interesting. I went through the stuff that it has. I wanted to give you an example of it and show you the print in my terminal. But my terminal cannot display Unicode 8. So I tried my browser. I have two browsers. Both can display Unicode 8. I tried several other things, but eventually what I reached is that the software on my computer, the browsers and the terminals and additional software, was not as up to date as my dead language. And it was very frustrating because I'm sitting here going like, isn't this supposed to be like dead and gone, and like I can't get anything to be as updated as that? It's just ridiculous. But I will show a few things. First, these are changes that Unicode 8 introduced to languages. This doesn't affect most of us. My language is actually introduced way earlier. I like to say my language as if I own it. But these are languages of people that could not express themselves fully as people who speak other languages and write in other languages and read in other languages, but now they can. And this is very important because it has to do with the ability of people to be included and be involved in the world in a fully inclusive way and a fully integrated way. And I think it's very important. And I think it shows my ignorance that I'm only familiar with some of these. But these people are very much familiar with themselves, and until Unicode 8, they did not have a proper representation, which is very important to have. So I'm very appreciative of changes like these. I want to show you something else in Unicode. You can use, let's say, 524 as a base and char names full. And what we could do is define some stuff using /n from Unicode. So these will be Unicode characters. First, we're going to use the zero width joiner. And then zero width joiner allows us to join things together with no width. So it actually compiles them together as one glyph. And I hope you use the terminology correctly, which I'm probably not. So this is a combination. You can see that I have the dot there. And what this does is combine a heart and a color. So this creates a red heart, which is really nice. And you have a variation here, so you can pick the tone of the heart, because all of our hearts have different tones. And I can take a character of a woman, I can take a character of a kiss, and I can join them, of course, UTF-8, my terminal doesn't support all of this, but I can join them together using a zero width join. And if my computer was as up to date as my language, you could see this picture that we have composed out of all of these rules, which is very cool. Unicode 8 specifically adds something called diversity system, which allows to include body color tone. So you can take a person with, this is specifically on the left, a color that is ambiguous in order to make it relate to anyone, or specifically The Simpsons, you pick, and gives you a tone of color, and that one allows you to represent people as they are in the world. And there are several of these. It actually uses the Fitzpatrick scale, which is a known scale that is used as a reference. And when you mix these together, you get people who are the same colors as exist in the real life, not the real life, in real life. So let's say that we take this situation again. We have the bin mode up there, and we have the zero width joiner, and we have those hearts. And I've read a lot about I've read about a few books recently. There's a specific book that talks about these relationships that two women have. We start by defining two specific darker shades of body tone. One is the type 5, one is the type 6. The type 6 is the darkest, I believe. And we define two variables, Addie Brown and Rebecca Primus. And these are two women, African-American women, who in the 19th century in America, in the 1860s, had a very frowned upon relationship. And there's a book called Seth Histories, I hope I pronounced it correctly, A Global History of Love Between Women by Leela J. Rupp. And we are finally able to construct together women of an appropriate shade, their real color, the real them, and create their relationship in full Unicode. And I think that is, I honestly think that is beautiful. All right. No, it is the Unicode 8 support in Perl 524. It's, I don't want to say, Perl made us be able to represent people's honest and real relationship in life and blah, blah, blah. But Unicode 8 under Perl allows us to. Okay, I'm sorry. So let's talk about the future a bit. People always wonder, so what's going to happen in the next version? So we're working on 525. We're already at the 4th iteration of it. 525.0 existed, but it existed just as soon as 524 came out. So let's talk about some stuff that we're going to do, or might do, or probably will do. So first, I'm going to talk about a few fixes, okay? Temp name from POSIX. It is a bad function. It was deprecated since 522, so 2 versions, and now it's gone. That's it. If you would like to use something familiar, you could use file temp or the similar functionalities in other modules. This used to exist, require : and then a module, and how it exists too, gone. We talked about this a little bit. The explicit curly braces in regex now are gone, okay? They were deprecated in 516, so that was quite a long time ago, and they started issuing warnings for 2 versions now. So in 522 they started warning, in 526, bye, gone, that's it. Of course, we also have this thing, you could do 2 X's on a regex. That's also removed. That's actually interesting because it's removed in order to allow us to extend it further. Where? Good question. But now we can. So they're gone, and maybe you will see them again, and they will actually do something. Hopefully useful. So yeah, it's also been deprecated since 522. We have a policy of deprecating at least 2 versions before we're able to remove them. Unfortunately, there are some things that have been deprecated for a long time, and we're still arguing whether to remove them. One example that we found recently was deprecated by Larry in 1996. No, specifically X. So yeah, there was a feature recently that we've noticed was deprecated by Larry in 1996, and we're now arguing on whether to remove it or not. So, you know, people talk about us not being stable and changing all the time. Geez, join that conversation. Okay, moving on. This doesn't crash anymore. Yeah, I got one person really excited. So yes, you don't have to do this, but at least it won't crash. I don't really know what it does, to be honest. And maybe except for Father C, I don't think a lot of people do. Okay, this was specifically any situation of having quotes where you had dollar foo, and then you had 2 colons, and then you had dollar bar. It merged them differently since 518, which is bad. It was a change in behavior, it's a breakage, so we fixed that, okay? That is actually fixed, I think it's important. We also have a few optimizations, so I think that's important too, because optimization are awesome. Recently, we've been putting a lot of effort into optimization, a lot of effort. There are really interesting things going on, and when I say we, I mean specifically Dave Mitchell, not we as in anyone that I am in the group of, but let's talk about some stuff. Bare word constant strings are now constant folded, which is really, really, really good. and very important. And they were thanks to a person sitting here. Aaron, raise your hand, man. There you go. If you want to say thank you, he'll probably try to avoid everyone after. Okay, subroutine signatures that you've seen, and you're like, hey, that's awesome, I should use this, but isn't it slow? Right now, in a branch that was already merged into core, it's actually almost how do you say that word? Identically as fast. Did I say that right? Damn English. Almost the exact same speed as if you didn't, and Dave is not done yet. So we might just see subroutine signatures even faster, and then you would have a very good reason to use it, because now your code is clear, very awesome, and it will you will be able to rage a lot of people, and it will also be faster. So okay. Now there are some platforms, we don't all know this, but there are some platforms that actually support collation and UTF-8 locales. So Perl will actually use those if they're available, which is very good. And Unicode 9, under features, new features, there's avocado. We already have it merged. Everyone is talking about whiskey and taco, but I don't eat tacos and I don't drink, so I'm very excited about avocados. So now there's an avocado. It's already merged, you just don't have it released yet. But other than avocado, they actually did a few things that are important to other people who are not me, and these are the following. Groups of people that are now also being represented and have an equal stage with everyone else. And I think that's really, really, really cool. So yes, so features. Okay, Unicode 9, we covered that one. There are some syntax improvements for reference aliasing. So the reference aliasing that I showed now has an additional tweak in the reference to make it, in the syntax to make it even easier and even better. This part, I don't know how many people know this. It allows you to write your code and you write your source code in really weird encodings. And this mechanism was used before. It was now removed for several reasons. You can use filter encoding, which does the same thing, and you can use filter from encoding PM if you still want to do it. I don't know why, but if you do, you have those mechanisms, and we don't need to support this weird thing that was actually causing us trouble. We now recognize version control markers thanks to Mauke. Look a smile over there. And that means that GCC does this, and I believe a few others, right? I took the patch from GCC. Right, okay. So GCC supports it, probably others. And what it does is that if you accidentally left you did a git merge, and for some reason you missed the parts where it says, hey, this is from head and this is from that branch and these conflicted, please resolve this. And you did just like colleagues of mine at a different company did, where they merged a 5-month branch on a huge PHP application, just said, screw it, and just added and committed all of it. Perl will actually at compilation say, I think you made a mistake here. Which is really, really, really good. It's very nice. It's small stuff like that that make your work much better. There's a thing called Unicode script extensions, and what they do is extend the mechanism called Unicode scripts, and they are much more accurate in a lot of things. So they're now turned on by default. It's really good. You don't have to explicitly say. The original script is also supported if you want to use it directly, but by default you're using now the much more accurate one called script extensions. This is thanks to Carl Williamson, which uses less memory. Thank you, Tux. We now have an attribute to subroutines, :const. That's kind of neat. We had to say farewell to Usenet in all the documentation, which apparently it still existed in. So that's gone. Usenet doesn't exist anymore, and now we will stop directing people there, which is good. The Perl documentation could use a lot of love, and anyone who wants to join and wants to look at something they could fix, we would really appreciate it. And most of it, it's funny enough, most of the documentation changes that we actually need done are how to present things to other people that is not from the perspective of an implementer, but from the perspective of a user. So when you look at something and you say, this is the best way for me to explain it to a colleague, these are the patches that we really, really would like to have. So if you're interested, you could do stuff like that. And there is also an idea called script runs. Carl Williamson was thinking about this and suggesting it. Unicode is really weird. Larry showed a few examples where two different characters look exactly the same and sometimes almost exactly the same. And Unicode has this in a lot of ways. It has scripts And it has characters in those scripts which can look very similar or exactly the same. And sometimes when you look at the code, you won't know the difference, but someone can give them as input to you. And then all of your input checks could crash if you're checking for A to Z. If I find something that is not A to Z, but looks exactly like A to Z. And that's a problem. So we're thinking about introducing something called script runs to allow you to basically say, and I want to make sure they're all from the same script. I don't know if I explained this well, but once we have it, we'll probably find a better explanation. Indented here docs, basically the ability to put in a here doc and then to start the here doc from where you're at instead of going all the way to the back. Has anyone had this? Like you put in, I see someone there doing this. Okay, good. It's a small thing, but it is so important. Matthew Horsfall did this, and his email started as, people told me I can't, so here's a patch that does this. Can anyone tell me what I got wrong? And the reply was, it doesn't seem like you did. So it's pretty cool. We're just revising how to do this, and what would be the nicest syntax. We're probably going to go with the here doc and then a tilde to the terminator. So the tilde would basically say, and please shift it. Ruby does this. So yeah, what else? I'm going probably to an end. What else are we going to do? Who knows? There are some ideas about removing that 1996 feature. We might. There are other ideas that I can't share at the moment. Some of them because I just don't know them. Some of them because we're still just throwing some ideas around. But we're probably going to have a lot because this is all we did all of this in like 4 releases. We still have quite a few more to go because 5.26 is going to come out after 5.25.10. So we got a way to go. If you're interested, you know, you could join and you could look at it and you can give comments and you can suggest stuff. So I'm gonna end with one small example. I gave a similar talk about Perl and Perl at a distance at FOSDEM. And there are a lot of Python people at FOSDEM. I have a lot of Python friends. It's not a language bash at all. What I was interested in is that there was a Python book that gave an example of this subroutine, right, that just does a pairwise sum. And what it wanted to show was how elegant Python is, which it is. And what it compared to was Perl. So I basically said, look at this program. It's very simple. It gets 2 parameters. They're both lists. It creates an empty list. And then it does for I in the range of the length of 1 and appends to a result the sum of all of these pairs. And then it returns that result. It's very elegant. It's very small. And it's very clear. And then they gave the Perl version just to showcase the difference in elegance. So what we have here is a pairwise sum. It takes 2 arguments. It creates a result. Let's forget that it assigns to the result array what would be the default anyway. And then it dereferences both of those args because it has to send them as references, right? You can't just send 2 lists. There are no lists. You can't send 2 arrays because it becomes the list. And then it does a for each on them. And then it does a push into the result. And then it returns a reference to that result. So I rewrote it using syntax that has existed before 5.24. And I think it's an indication of Perl at a distance, which is this. Right? We have 2 elements. That's fairly simple. What we're going to do is go to the first one and dereference it and get the last index. And we're using the last index there as a range between 0 and the last index. We're feeding that into a map, which will go over that index. And then we'll go to the first list in the index and add it to the second list in the index. And all of this gets done within an array reference, which is returned as a last statement. That's it.
But this could be done in 5.12. Similarly.
Yes, and this is a note that this could be similarly in 5.12 or in even older version. But what I want to show is it could be so simple with updated versions, but we don't really update our code that often to reflect the syntax. But if you actually take a look at the syntax at a distance, Perl has gone really far ahead. So it's pretty cool. And when I write a Perl book, I will include this with the original Python example. No. All right, so I'd like to end with this quote. The past is but the beginning of a beginning. So all that we've done so far is still our beginning. So we're still waiting to begin stuff. We're still beginning stuff. And if you'd like to see what we're doing, and if you'd like to be involved in what we're doing, you don't really have to know C, you don't really have to know all the code. If you want to help, you really don't have to know C that well, and you don't have to know the internals that well, and we have like an onboarding period, which is basically us answering your questions, hopefully if we have time and if they're clear enough, and hopefully trying to help you out. So we will do this if you want. You can go into the Perl 5 porters at perl.org. This will be the mailing list, which you could subscribe to, and you will get all of the stuff that are coming in. It's a lot, because there's actually a lot going on. But let's say you don't want to get involved. You just want to know what's going on. You can do that too. There's Perl 5 summaries, which is something that I maintain. You can go to the Twitter account, Perl 5 summaries. You can go to my blog, which is mostly now the summaries where I publish these. They might be moving to a different blog at some point. And you can also register to a list that just receives summaries, which is Perl 5-summary, and you just get emails of summaries, which is very, very useful. And I cover the bugs, and I cover the fixes, new bugs, old bugs, resolved, rejected, discussions, ideas, updates, stuff like that. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your time. I'm done.